We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome to Conspiracy Corner Podcast, everyone. This is Abe, your host. It's been a minute. Took a little time off. This is the new channel, so hopefully you're subscribed. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe and like. And if you are subscribed and you know someone who is into conspiracy or paranormal or the macabre, anything like that, go ahead and share it, if you will, because YouTube, I had to start a new channel. Basically, not starting from scratch. I seen there's 8 subs from the old channel, so good to see you all. But yeah, basically today, I was going to go hiking, but it's snowing here in Kentucky, which is crazy. I was not expecting snow. Yesterday it snowed like crazy, and I was like, yeah. I came home from work. I work third, and I came home. I was like, yeah, we're not going hiking today. So it worked out, though, because I got to clean on the house, which was needed. So the house looks really good now. But, yeah. We'll get on with the show, though. Today we're covering Jack the Ripper. I haven't covered him yet, and I wanted to cover it. It gets into conspiracy. It kind of ties in with a conspiracy that a lot of people think that he was a Freemason. We'll get into that on later episodes. Today we're just covering basically the first murder of Jack the Ripper. So let's set the stage for this gruesome tale. Whitechapel. The district of Whitechapel lies in the heart of East End. It is said it is still not as fashionable as its West End neighbors, but like other, once grimy and sordid boroughs in the area, the blitz and years of replanning have transformed it. Its most prosperous air has not yet made it the most beautiful part of London, but it is a long way from being the worst slum in the country as it was in Queen Victoria's time. Then as now, it was home to a polyglot community of immigrants and cockneys whose families had lived there for centuries, Irish migrants and Polish and Jewish refugees who had fled from the Middle Europe pogroms of the 1860s, lived together in general harmony. Shabby shops and houses frequented narrow streets and gave access to innumerable stinking courts. These spawned thousands of lodging houses where for 3d a night a bed in a line of others could be bought. The 20th century researcher finds much to astonish the casual calls on neighbors that people would make at literally all hours of the night. Yeah, I did remember this definitely about Whitechapel, that it was like there was no time of day. Like day, night, early morning, it was always busy, no matter what. All shops were open. Definitely a contrast to 2021 and what's going on with everything shut down now. Let's see. Shops open long after midnight. Public houses, which, having thrown out their last customer at 3 a.m., would open again to serve liquid breakfast at 6. Many of the hovels had no cooking facilities, and hot food would be brought from pie shops and the like. A regular sight was the Sunday meat, when there was any, being taken to the baker's to be cooked for 2 pence. It was a London less than 3 miles from the bright lights of Haymarket and Piccadilly, with the Mott's Night House, or the notorious Kate Hamilton's, where £5 was the admission charge for the wealthy, entitled clientele. The gas and electric lighting that had been in use in the streets up west since the early 1800s had barely reached Whitechapel 80 years later. The shops and better class houses throughout London had these luxuries, but not the dwellings in the meaner streets, where oil lamps or candles provided a dismal and sinister illumination. Street traders were everywhere, costermongers, food vendors with fried fish, meat pies, pig's trotters, plum duff, baked potato, cat's meat, and hot wine. Yes, they ate cat. Street showmen of enormous variety proliferated. Pathetic freaks were exhibited: albinos, dwarves, elephant men, pig-faced ladies performing monkeys, Punch and Judy, black-faced clowns, fortune-telling, and stilt walkers. There was street music from the Italiante hurdy-gurdy to the British one-man band. So basically a freak show, man, a circus, Yeah, black-faced clowns back in the day. Imagine that going on now. People would flip their shit. Nearby, the docks are created for work laborers, but it was often and irregular and depended on the arrival of ships. Men were often employed by the day only: milliners, dressmakers, furriers, tambour makers, shoebinders, pastry cooks, cigar makers, seamstresses, and laundry maids worked long hours and earned very little. The vast markets at Spitalfields and Billingsgate, supplying meat and fish, gave employment, as did the enormous fruit and vegetable market at Covent Garden. But for many there was little chance of honest work, and the teeming rookeries in such places as Clerkenwell, Westminster, the Borough, and Whitechapel were their refuge. Most estates had the typical water tank, which was turned on for a short time each day. A rat-infested garbage tip was rarely removed, and serving the whole court the ever-present, all-pervading lavatory. The fact that many inhabitants of the West End could remember the last public hanging at Newgate 20 years before did not discourage crime. There were many areas of Whitechapel where the police would only venture in groups. And a mile further, east into Dockland's notorious Ratcliffe Highway, they would not venture at all. A contemporary writer described it as a place where crime stalked unmolested. To tread its deadly length was a foolhardy act that might quail the stoutest heart. Ratcliffe Highway had been the site of a series of brutal and barbaric murders in 1811. Over a period of 12 December nights, 2 households comprising of 7 people were clubbed to death. There had been an unprecedented public outcry and a demand for more effective policing. For almost 8 decades, legends circulated in the East End, and the pitiless slaughters who accorded the highest, if unenviable, accolade of crime of the century. And indeed they were, until one dark night in August 1888, when the gruesome work of a slashing knife made its claim. It's 3 a.m., the devil's hour here in Kentucky. Perfect timing. Nice snowy weather. Let's get into the first murder of Jack the Ripper. John Paul quickened his step. He had never liked the place. It was familiar enough. He passed this way every day on his way to work, portering at Smithfield Market. The homeward walk was different, though. It was funny how everything changed in the dark. Buck's Row narrowed and became darker as he made his way towards Brady Street. Only faint illumination came from the unbroken line of shabby terraced houses. People were getting out of bed to go to work. Others, like dock workers and meat porters from Smithfield, were returning home. Paul paused for a moment to tie his bootlace, putting his foot against the crumbling low stone wall which guarded the embankment of the East London Railway Company. The line ran under the road and entered the tunnel approach to Whitechapel Station. In a couple of hours the station would be busy, but now, at 3:15 a.m., it lay silent and shuttered in the darkness. As he straightened up, a sudden chill ran down his spine, for on the other side of the street, barely visible against the yellow gas-lit interior of one of the dwellings, he could see the figure of a man crouching in the roadway beside a stable entrance. As Paul approached, the figure rose in front of him. "Come and look at this woman," he said, motioning towards a bundle on the ground. A body laying prostrate on the ground was pretty unremarkable in a part of London where drinking dens were six times more numerous than today. Paul looked at the woman and concluded that she was drunk. "Let's get her on her feet," he said. It was difficult to get hold of the woman in the darkness, and as Paul reached beneath the woman's shoulders, he recoiled as a warm stickiness engulfed his hand. As they rolled her over, the stranger let out a strangled cry. Look at her throat!" 2 sweeping incisions ran the width of the woman's neck and had all but severed the head. The ugly wheels cut back to the spinal cord and oozed blood which formed a crimson pool below her head. What thoughts went through the 2 men's minds as each nervously surveyed the other is not recorded. The skirts had been pulled high above the woman's knees, which had led her discoverer to suppose that she had been raped. Now the 2 men straightened her clothing and, terrified, set off in search of a constable. 300 yards further east in Brady Street, where a single street lamp threw fitful but comforting light, they found Police Constable Hayne. Had the 2 men gone west, they would have found the law more quickly. For P.C. Neal's beat was bringing him towards the scene of the crime, and at the moment Constable Hayne was summoned, Neal was already shining his lantern on the body of Mary Nichols. Mary Nichols, or a.k.a. Polly, as she was known to her many friends in the area, was 42 years old. Polly had once been pretty enough to attract machinist William Nichols, marry him, and bear 5 children. But by 1881, her drinking and general slovenlessness, she was sloven, had resulted in him leaving her. Basically laziness and alcoholism. A spell in Lambeth House a spell in Lambeth workhouse, a union with a Walworth blacksmith named Drew, and a short time as a domestic servant in one of the biggest merchants' houses on Wandsworth Common, were punctuated more and more frequently by bouts of drunkenness. Eventually, she became a fugitive from the law, having stolen a measly £3 from her employer. The last day of August 1888, which was also to be the last day of her life, found Polly as a pathetic drab, old before her time, 5 front teeth missing, and with a history of vagrancy and petty crime. Polly was a female tramp, a prostitute willing to sell herself for 4 pence it would cost to gain readmittance into the filthy lodgings at 18th Rall Street, where she frequently stayed. Early that night, penniless, she had been turned away by the lodging housekeeper. Thrall Street, like its infamous neighbor Flower and Dean Street, had many cheap lodgings for women, but terms were strictly cash in advance. Though only 5'2", Polly was tough. "I'll be back. Look what a fine bonnet I've got," she told the lodging housekeeper. Was she going to pawn it? Unlikely, as it was too late, and in any case the item would have fetched very little. Could she possibly have thought that the black straw bonnet, velvet trimmed though it might be, would have guaranteed her doubtful charms? The last person to have claimed to seen Polly alive was a friend, Emily Holland, who had spoken to her around 2:30 a.m. at the corner of Whitechapel Road and Osborne Street. They often used the same doss house. Although a pathetic character, there was something about Polly, perhaps her infectious sense of humor, or her gaiety, in the face of problems, in geniality, even in drink. Whatever the quality, it was missing tonight, and Emily was concerned about her. Tonight Polly was so drunk she could scarcely stand, but she would not heed her friend's advice to stay with her, and instead reeled off down Osborne Street. The next time Emily saw her, the bonnet was gone. The brown ulster, the brown linsey frock, petticoats, stays, and black wool stockings were gone, and her friend was gone. The mortal remains of Polly Nichols were identified by Emily Holland in the mortuary attached to the old Montague Street workhouse. Dr. Llewellyn, who lived near Buck's Row, had performed an initial and very perfunctory examination of the body in the gutter at Buck's Row, even allowing for the fact that it was carried out in the light of 4 police bull's-eye lanterns, under the steady gaze of a crowd of onlookers. It seems remarkable that the doctor failed to notice that Polly had been disemboweled. Her stomach had been hacked open and slashed many times. Several incisions ran across the abdomen, which had been repeatedly slashed and cut. The killer had used a knife, possibly with a 6 to 8 inch blade, on her vagina. Polly's husband had not seen her for 3 years, and there had been little to endear her to him, but one look at the mutilations moved him to murmur, "I forgive you for everything, now that I have seen you like this." The newspapers of the day reported events in much more detail than their modern counterparts, and the violence and frenzy of the attack can readily be seen from this account in the Star. No murder was ever more ferociously or brutally done. The knife, which must have been large and sharp, was jabbed into the deceased at the lower part of the abdomen, and then drawn upwards not once, but twice. The first cut veered to the right, slitting up the groin and passed over the left hip. but the second cut went straight upward along the center of the body and reaching the breastbone. Such horrible work could only be done by the work of a maniac. Later victims bore similar injuries. Upward forceful thrust, the unmistakable autograph of one assailant. The elementary blunder on the part of the doctor in the failing to notice that the victim had been butchered, ripped from belly to throat, and the subsequent premature removal of the body by the police had destroyed vital clues. The carelessness, or even culpable negligence at the scene of the crime was compounded by the fact that Whitechapel had no public mortuary, and the body was taken to the workhouse mortuary, where it was dealt with not by a professional, but merely a pauper inmate. Robert Munn had stripped and washed the body before the post-mortem could be carried out. When later the question, why so little blood at the scene, was posed, it could not be answered. It was unlikely that the body had been transported there. Front doors opened almost directly to the street. A carriage would have been heard and noticed. Anyway, how much blood had there been? Nobody knew. The police had washed it away as soon as the body had been removed. That's sketchy. Jack certainly had luck on his side. People had been sleeping and indeed were lying awake within 6 feet of where the body, still warm, was found. Police patrols passed the spot every 30 minutes, with 3 watchmen, 4 policemen, and more able to converge on the body in under a minute, and early morning workers moving around. How had the killer managed his task so silently, and his escape with bloody hands enclosed so completely? It was early days. Whitechapel had seen nothing yet. So there you have it. There's the first murder of Jack the Ripper. Pretty Polly. I don't know. A lot of sketchy stuff there. I mean, definitely sounds like an inside job, I think. I've made a video on Jack the Ripper and the Masonic connections, which I will try to leave as a clickable video at the end of this podcast so you guys can check it out to kind of get a deeper, more down the rabbit hole taste of what we're dealing with. But yeah, I mean, a gigantic pool of blood should have been at the scene if the crime was committed there, and it wasn't found there. I definitely think it's odd the police washing away the blood, kind of like how they washed away a message that was scrawled at a later scene, which we'll probably cover. I don't know. Whole thing's crazy. They definitely said too, as much study as I've studied into Jack the Ripper and stuff, that perhaps he could have had like a medical background. Perhaps he was a doctor, you know. I don't know. I just wanted to kind of lay out. This is definitely going to be a series. I kind of wanted to lay out just the first murder on this episode. Kind of give you guys something to chew on for a second. Get you guys the gears working. It's good to be back. I'm glad to be back. I had to take a little time off. Honestly, just I kind of got down in the dumps when my old channel got shut down, and I don't know. I feel like this is something I enjoy doing, and this is what I should be doing, you know. And I guess don't give up is what I'm saying, you know. And honestly, wear it as a badge of honor, you know, because it's not me. It's everyone else is getting censored on platforms, you know, and that's the attitude that they've shared while they're talking during their podcast and stuff. Is they're pretty much like, look, wear it as a badge of honor. If you're not getting shut down, you're not putting out enough truth and you're not doing something right. If you are getting shut down, you're doing the right thing. You're saying too much and they don't like that. Um, so yeah, I kind of wear it as a badge of honor at this point. I'm glad to be back though. There's more episodes to come. For new listeners, it depends on honestly how I feel. I've had people say, hey, why don't you set up once a week, a day that you do a podcast? My thing is I would be limiting myself. I added a new playlist on the channel. There's over 105 old podcast episodes. If you want to check it out, it's on every subject from random conspiracies to ufology, paranormal, religion, ancient mythology. We delve into everything here. So check it out if you want to check out the older episodes. Thank you all for listening. I hope you all have a good day, and see you later.
We are, as a people,